Hello everyone, today I want to talk to you about how, under Trump's new isolationism, the next step will be a significant increase in tariffs on copper and pharmaceuticals. In addition, according to the latest global polls, the highest number of people are anti-American and anti-Russian, while those who are anti-China are now only found in the United States, Japan, and Australia. The negative effects of Trump's global tariff war are gradually emerging. Although Western governments, led by the United States, continue to hype up China as the so-called greatest threat, people's views around the world have already changed. On July 8, the well-known research organization Pew Research Center released a poll conducted from January 8 to April 26 of this year. The survey covered nearly 32,000 adults from 25 upper and middle-income countries across 6 continents. The results show that although the United States is still regarded as a primary ally by people in some regions, in 8 countries, the public most frequently sees the United States as the main threat. In another 10 countries, including many European nations, the United States is seen as the second biggest threat. As for the US, China, and Russia, aside from the 8 countries that view the United States as the primary threat, there are also 8 countries, all of them in Europe, that see Russia as the main threat. Only 3 countries now consider China the top threat: Japan, Australia, and the United States. And those 8 countries that see the United States as the primary threat include Canada, Mexico, Indonesia, South Africa, Brazil, Argentina, Spain, and Kenya. Among them, in the lists of top threats for Spain and Kenya, the United States is on par with Russia and Somalia, respectively. However, among the 24 countries, respondents in 15 of them also chose the United States as their top ally. Among them, in 3 countries, the United States is tied for first place with other countries. In the Asia-Pacific region, the most pro-American countries are Japan and South Korea, both of which are treaty allies of the United States. Respondents in Japan and South Korea overwhelmingly regard the United States as their top ally, with the proportion being 89% for Japan and 78% for South Korea. Nevertheless, Japanese respondents still see the United States as the second biggest threat after China, with 18% holding this view. Since the poll concluded on April 26, and the United States has recently unilaterally imposed a 25% tariff on Japanese goods, it is likely that the number of Japanese people who view the US as the primary threat will increase significantly, but this poll does not reflect that change. What immediately catches our attention is that, in Indonesia, the most populous country in Southeast Asia, 40 respondents see the United States as the primary threat, which is more than twice the number who view China that way. Indonesians are very friendly toward China, with the largest number of people regarding China as their main ally, while the United States is seen only as the second most important ally. As the South China Morning Post reported, since Trump returned to the White House this January, he has floated the idea of taking over Canada and Greenland, which has sparked a huge backlash abroad. Then, at the beginning of April, the Trump administration proposed a comprehensive increase in tariffs on most countries, including traditional allies, aimed to cut back on global soft power investments and question NATO's security guarantees. The Pew survey was conducted against this backdrop. As for views on Russia, in this round of polling, 8 countries, including the Netherlands, Germany, the UK, France, Italy, Sweden, Hungary, and Poland, listed Russia as the primary threat. When it comes to China, people in 3 countries see China as the main threat. Among them, Japan and Australia have the highest proportions of people who see China as the primary threat, at 53% and 52% respectively. The other country is the United States, where 42% of people view China as the main threat. From this, it can be said that when politicians in Japan, Australia, and the United States take an anti-China stance, they are also catering to public sentiment. 3 researchers from the Pew Research Center pointed out that geography and historical conflicts are almost always the main reasons why people see a particular country as a major threat. One of the researchers, Janelle Federow, said that the United States is the only country outside the Asia-Pacific region where more than 20% of respondents see China as the biggest threat. In the United States, 42% of respondents believe that China is the primary threat. However, different political parties have varying views on this issue. For example, Republicans are more likely to see China as the primary threat, while Democrats tend to view Russia as the main threat. According to the South China Morning Post, people's perceptions of both China and the United States have changed over time. Since the Pew Research Center began this survey in 2019, the proportion of Canadians who see the United States as the primary threat has nearly tripled, rising from 20% to 59%. Meanwhile, the proportion of Canadians who view China as the primary threat has dropped by 15 percentage points since 2019. However, during the same period, the proportion of Indians who see China as the primary threat has increased by 16 percentage points. After looking at the Pew Research Center's survey, we can draw the following conclusions. First, according to this survey of 25 middle and high-income countries around the world, after Trump took office, the United States rose to the top of the list as the world's most feared country. Just like Russia, there are 8 countries whose people see the US as the primary threat. Trump can really take a lot of credit for this. Don't think that leadership doesn't matter. This is absolutely destroying America's soft power. Second, only the people of the US, Japan, and Australia still see China as the primary threat. From another perspective, among the world's 3 major powers, China is actually the more popular one. This relates to China's promotion of a shared future for humanity, but it's also because in the past 40+ years, China has never gone to war with another country. Coupled with China's economic development and technological progress, this built up China's soft power. Third, don't think the US can do this without paying a price. If things continue, even the dominance of the US dollar could fall apart. In addition, Trump's move toward isolationism is becoming more obvious. On July 8, Trump announced on social media and at a cabinet meeting that in the coming days he would roll out even more aggressive tariff policies. He said there would no longer be tariff deferrals for specific countries, and that he would soon announce high new tariffs on key goods such as copper and pharmaceuticals. At a White House meeting, Trump directly singled out the copper and pharmaceutical industries, stating that he would impose a 50% tariff on copper imports. He did not specify when these tariffs would take effect. However, on the same day, U.S. Secretary of Commerce Rodney said he expected the copper tariffs to be implemented as early as the end of the month or the beginning of August. Trump is slapping tariffs on one industry after another, aiming to force industries to return to the United States. The U.S. has already imposed a 50% tariff on imported steel and a 25% tariff on imported cars and auto parts, and now it's targeting imported copper. In February this year, Trump, citing national security, instructed Secretary of Commerce Rodney to investigate copper imports. On July 8, Rodney said that the investigation had concluded, and their intention is to bring copper back, to bring copper production back home, that is, to the United States. As soon as the news broke, U.S. copper futures prices soared, at one point on July 8 posting the largest intraday gain since 1988. J.P. Morgan analysts said the market was surprised by the proposed 50% tariff on copper, as they had initially estimated the copper tariff would be around 25%. Copper, which is the world's 3rd most consumed metal after steel and aluminum, is widely used in electronics, construction, and industrial equipment. According to data from the U.S. Geological Survey, nearly half of the copper used in the United States is imported, with most of it coming from Chile, Canada, and Mexico. Pierre Gratton, president of the Mining Association of Canada, warned that the U.S. does not have enough refining capacity or smelters and can only import this metal from countries like Canada. High tariff rates could actually harm other manufacturing industries in the United States. In addition, Trump has also set his sights on the pharmaceutical industry, saying that he will soon announce extremely high tariffs on imported drugs up to 200%, for example. However, Trump said that before the tariffs are imposed, pharmaceutical companies might have about a year to a year and a half to move their drug production out of the United States. These remarks have made investors very nervous. However, there is also a Wall Street lobbyist who doesn't really believe what Trump says, commenting that this is typical Trump-style exaggeration. Trump plans to take action across the board, not just in pharmaceuticals and copper. He intends to launch Section 232 investigations into lumber, aerospace, semiconductors, and consumer electronics, all under the pretext of national security. These investigations are still ongoing, and all of these industries are facing the threat of hefty tariffs. According to analysis by the Financial Times, the U.S. investigations into these key industries will only increase uncertainty for its trading partners like the UK. They are already struggling, trying to protect themselves through negotiations from the broad impact of Trump's reciprocal tariffs. It can be summed up like this. First, Trump is clearly taking an isolationist approach, fantasizing about holding a new Yalta conference in Beijing with the leaders of China and Russia on September 3rd. He seeks a sense of the great powers dividing up spheres of influence, and doesn't seem to mind China having its own area of control. In short, as long as America's core interests aren't threatened, that's good enough. Second, Trump wants to impose heavy tariffs on one industry after another. Now, by announcing tariffs on copper and pharmaceuticals, he aims to force these industries to return to manufacturing in the United States. In his vision, American goods can be exported in large quantities, while products from other countries are best kept out of the US market. This is what Trump means by making America great again. Third, Japan misjudged the situation, thinking as America's key ally in the Asia-Pacific, it would get preferential treatment on tariffs and wouldn't be imposed on Japanese cars. But Trump wants to carve out spheres of influence with China and Russia, and he isn't interested in allying with Japan to contain China. Naturally, he doesn't want to make special exceptions for Japanese cars entering the US. Fourth, whether or not American industries can ultimately be revitalized is another matter, but under the protection of high tariff walls, American products will only become more and more expensive, which essentially means giving up on competing in the global market.